Hello, everyone. Sorry I'm late today, but there has been so much life going on. But never mind that. Let's go and get on with the story. Today's story is The Blacksmith and Bridey and Little Bear. Time out of mind it had stood there, feeling and fumbling its stones into new shapes as the aeons passed. And the water had always flowed beside it, sometimes a little stream, others a nightmare of tossing mains and black water. It stood there now, grey and weathered, green moss and yellow lichen spattering on its walls, hard to make out from between the hoary trunks of oak and ash, and the tangle of rowan and elder that grew right down to the water's edge. He stood beside her on the far bank, just too old now to clutch her skirts at the sight of something new and strange. His bright face was smeared with green from the twigs slapping at him as he followed in her wake through the woods of Caledon. His feet were wet. He was cold, and it was many hours since they had shared the last of the porridge. Why have we come here? He wondered again, but only inside his head. Long years with her had taught him there was no profit in asking until he already knew the answer within himself. Then she would smile at him and stroke his hair, and a fire would rush between them, all in an instant. He liked that. She still stood there, like a white stone statue. Only her long black hair blew between them in the cold wind, like a dark curtain. He began to fidget, shuffling his feet, slapping his arms to get the circulation back before he turned into a block of ice. He felt her irritation, looked up, but she was still staring across the turgid water into a block of ice. And that was the grey bothy that hid in the woods. He stood still, but he couldn't stop the shivering. She put one hand on his shoulder, and the fire crept into him, and he was warm. Come, she ordered, and strode out onto the first of the great slabs which stepped across the river. Huge, ancient, sparkling with quartz, they glimmered as though they made their own light somehow. The twilight was brighter because of them, and brighter as they walked across the bridge. Walked? She walked. He struggled, pushed and shoved against the wind until finally he gave up standing and crept across the stones on hands and knees. They arrived. The point of light he had seen from the far bank was a lantern hung in the back of a roofed forecourt. As they stepped under the arch, he could smell and see the great fire in the forge. Out of the wind, his ears stopped singing, and he was suddenly warm again. He gasped in pain as the blood began to flow through shrunken, frozen arteries. "Hiya, brother! Out here? 'Tis cold, and the child be hungry." She stood a moment, waiting a response, then gathered him to her and took him to the little hearth at the back of the court. She dipped the ladle into the iron bucket and filled the kettle, pulling it over the fire on its chain. He took small sticks and coaxed up a hungry blaze. They waited together. The even star had slid up over the horizon before he came. The boy heard the stealthy pad, 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 the careful breathing, even over the rush of wind and water, as she taught him to hear. And then the man stood in the arch, blotting out the bright darkness of the night. The boy could smell night fern, winter honeysuckle, and witch hazel on his body, along with the earthy smell of badger and fox. "That's brought the young'un, then?" The man snuffed the air, scenting his visitors as he reached up to light another lantern. Now the boy could see him, huge and tall, clad in skins, bare arms covered in the same delicate spiral tracery that embroidered his mistress' skin, too. Blinking, the boy stretched his neck upwards, found his eyes, found the man's eyes. Bright green pools as wild as a stag's. They shone out of the patterned blue whorls on his face. I heard thee, sister. White teeth shone as the man smiled, even as I stood on the mountain. Here. He tossed a coney and the boy caught it nimbly. I brought dinner and the boy can prepare it. Quickly and cleanly, the boy skinned and gutted and spitted the rabbit, setting it to roast. Carefully, he fed the fire until the flames were blue. The woman took the kettle and poured boiling water onto a pot of herbs. Suddenly, the forge smelled of spring. Soon they ate, and long later, the boy woke with a start from the comfortable, sated sleep. Tip, tap, thunk. Peering through the archway, he saw the old moon, her dry dugs and slack belly sagging as she hobbled across the sky. Quietly, he sat up, freeing his feet from the bracken, and loosened the knife in his belt, for he was alone. An owl hooted softly from the rafters. He shivered. But he went to the archway, keeping in the shadows. Tip, tap, thunk. Coming up a stone path from the bridge was an old crone. Tip, tap, thunk. Her 2 feet and 1 stick made noise enough to wake the dead. Little boy, the voice whined. I'm tired and thirsty from a long winter's traveling. Would you bring me into the warm by your fire? The boy stood still in the center of the arch, barring the way. Young man, I am so tired, and your fire smells so good. Will you give me some warmth? Tip, tap, thunk. She was closer now. Tip, tap, thunk. He could smell the rankness on her like a vixen in heat. He still stood in the archway, barring the way. Tip, tap, thunk. Tip, tap, thunk. Tip, tap, thunk. She was so close now, he could see the grime in the wrinkled flesh, the cobwebs, the rags that hid nothing. The skin of her breasts and belly were like old parchment, written over in faint blue whorls. And then he saw her eyes, deep, deeper than the deepest well they were, and at that very bottom, the last embers of the fire still glowed redly. He stood aside, opening the way, and in she came. He sat her down on the wooden stool his mistress lately occupied. Here, mother. He dipped the ladle into the iron bucket and offered it to her. Ah! She drew away so sharply she tumbled into the hearth and cowered there in the dusty ashes. He didn't understand. The water was fresh. He had drawn it himself before he went to sleep. "'Tis good, mother. Will you not try a sip?" And he drank from the ladle himself to show her it was good. "I'll die, boy, I'll die. The water from yon well, and if I take the water, there'll be no more of me. Not when I taste it." The boy didn't know what to do. He put the ladle back in the bucket and wet his fingers in the water, and came round and squatted beside her, put an arm around the sack of bones encased in skin. She could no longer escape him. He wet his lips with the water and gently pressed his mouth against hers. This time, the fire swept from him to her in a climax which shook them both so they fell apart. He stared at her and stared at her. Gone the dry parchment flesh, rounded now the arms and cheeks and breasts, firm belly and red lips. The long dark hair swung like a curtain between them. He scrambled back to the other side of the fire, and a great laugh made him jump. The huge fire in the forge leapt and danced. Bright sparks flew as the hammer sang on the glowing metal. "Here, boy," the blacksmith called him. And he came to the anvil, stood watching the smith as he turned and folded, turned and folded, turned and folded the length of metal time on time on time, beating it out and folding it again and again and again. "Strength, lad," the smith told him, "and sharpness and flexibility, and you'll need it in life if you use it to true." The boy watched as the sword was born and born again, 9 times into the fire, 9 times into the water. It hissed and spat like a raging cat as the smith soused it. "Caliburn, that's who they'll be." The smith spoke to the sword as he drew it out of the iron cauldron. But the boy had long ears, and he heard him. The smith finished and sharpened and polished the sword, and his hair fell out of the pigtail, holding it to swing like a curtain between them. Long and black it swung with every sweep of the sharpening stone. Finally, the sword was done, and the smith stood holding it up in the morning light. Dazzled, the boy saw rainbows spark from the spiral tracery on the blade. And suddenly the smith swung the sword up and then plunged it down, and the anvil screamed as the blade pierced it, and the boy fell back, clutching his ears. Getting back to his feet, he saw her behind the sword. The sword stood quivering in the anvil. The long curtain of dark hair half hid the faint blue swirl of tracery on her arms and face. Her deep green eyes smiled at him. "Come, little bear. You have seen it made, but it is not here you will draw it forth. Deep in the caves of Bel will you go to find the sword, if so that path you choose." And together they crossed the Clapper Bridge again, climbed the mountain, followed the deer trods through the trees of Caledon. And the new moon rose as they came to the green chapel, where the old man waited. And that was the story of the blacksmith and Bridey and Little Bear. It was the beginning. And later, I will tell you what happens next. But for now, that's it for this week. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I shall see you on the other side.